You've tried being the nice mom, you've tried being the strict mom. Neither seems to work. So, how do you actually build a real, lasting connection with your strong willed or neurodivergent child? Mama, are you tired of meltdowns stealing the peace in your home? Welcome to Parenting Beyond Meltdowns. I'm Amanda, a Christian life coach and a mom of a strong willed, neurospicy teen. If you've tried everything consequences, parenting books, crying out to the Father, and still feel like you're failing, you're not alone. Inside this podcast, we'll explore how faith, emotional regulation, and connection work together so that you can parent from peace even in the hardest moments. You don't have to hold it all together here. This is a safe space to lay it down. Welcome. Mamas, I want to thank you so much for launch week. It was amazing. You all showed up and showed me so much love. So today I want to kick it off by sharing a review from Brittany. Brittany said, parenting strong-willed kiddos can feel isolating, and I love how Amanda makes you feel like she's sitting next to you and giving you space to feel seen and also gently encourage you. I can't wait for more of these episodes. Thank you for creating them and bringing them back to connection, relationships, and faith. More, please. Thank you, Brittany, for your kind words. I used to think that connection came after compliance. If my child would just obey, listen, or calm down, then I could connect. But what I've learned is that connection isn't the reward, it's the foundation. And without it, everything else falls apart. There was a season that I was constantly on edge, walking on eggshells, barking orders, and then collapsing into guilt or anger at the end of the day. My son was pushing back at every turn. I thought he was rebelling and being defiant. But in reality, he was just trying to protect himself in a world that didn't feel safe. And I was unintentionally contributing to that. As promised, the Father brought me tools and people to teach me new ways of thinking. The very first time I heard someone say, all behavior is language, I felt like someone had just given me the keys to the kingdom, and at the same exact time, I felt so unbelievably upset that no one had ever told me this before. This might not be new information to you, but for me, growing up in a controlling, abusive home with little to no emotional intelligence being taught, it was life-changing to me. I had the thought, what if all the times that I was being told by well-meaning parents that my child was being disrespectful and manipulative, he was actually just trying to communicate the only way he knew how? So, Mama, let's flip the script and begin to look at our child's behavior differently. What if your child isn't being defiant, but actually just dysregulated and are communicating the only way they know how? So today, I want to walk through 4 connection-centered shifts that will begin to build trust with your dysregulated kiddos. Number 1, we want to focus on safety and connection over first-time obedience. Before your child can comply, they need to feel emotionally safe. This doesn't mean permissive parenting. It means creating an emotional environment where they know that they won't be punished for being human, because it's not really about punishment as much as it is about teaching and guiding them. I want you to ask yourself, does my child feel safe enough to be fully seen by me even when they're struggling? And I know that that can feel like a hard question, but what I want you to know is that while I am here to give you so much love and encouragement, and I want you to feel seen and heard and understood because I know that that's what I wanted, what I also needed, and honestly for a really long time wasn't willing to see, is that I wasn't helping our situation. There were things that I was doing that was actually making it worse, and I touched on that in episode 2. What I want you to know is that I'm not here just to love and encourage you, but I also want to call you up. A long time ago, someone told me that if a friend really loves you, they're not going to leave you where you are. They're going to call you higher. And so I want you to know that that's what I'm doing in this podcast is I'm calling you higher. And I'm doing that with as much love and kindness as I can. But there are sometimes going to be times when I say hard things that might hurt. And even saying that, like asking that question, does my child feel safe enough to be fully seen by me even when they're struggling? The enemy could totally take that question and twist it in your head and be like, well, that's judgmental, or of course my child feels safe. And I'm not necessarily talking physical safety, because emotional safety, that's what we're really dealing with. We can think that our kids feel emotionally safe with us, but that doesn't mean that they do. So I want to talk about one day when my child came home from school. I started to notice this pattern actually, where he was going to school and he may or may not have had a good day, but then he would come home and then he would just like completely lose it. And I was like, what on earth is going on? Like, this is not fair. And what I realized was happening, and you can do a little more research on this, and I'll probably talk about it in a later episode, but there's something called masking, where essentially your child will be able to keep it all together for other people, whether that's at church or school or with relatives or, anyone, doctors, whatever. They keep it all together. But then when they're home and they feel safe to just like let it all hang out, that's what they do. And so I realized that he was struggling to keep it all together at school. But when he came home, he felt like he was safe to be able to just like show up fully him, being dysregulated and upset. And so, what I want you to know is that while I do believe that he felt safe enough to come home and let it all hang out, I will be the first to admit that I wish that I could have been a safer place for him than I was when he was younger, because I don't feel like what I know now, I don't feel like I was that for him, that and what he needed at that age. But what I also want to remind you that while you may have moments of wishing, I wish I would have done it differently or I would have done it better, what I want you to know is now that we know more and we know to do better, we can do better. And so I don't want you to leave this space of like, I don't want it to leave hanging in the air any sort of shame or anything like that, because I want you to acknowledge, yes, we could have done it better, but we only had so much knowledge at that time. And now that we have more knowledge, we can do better this time. Number 2 is to get curious instead of furious. So when your child refuses, explodes, or shuts down, I want you to pause. And instead of reacting, I want you to ask yourself, what's underneath this behavior? Most meltdowns aren't out of disobedience. They're about unmet needs or a dysregulated nervous system. And I've learned to ask questions when I notice the mood shift, to try to figure out what's going on instead of taking offense to attitudes. One day, my kid came home from school and I don't know, there was definitely a shift in the mood and the atmosphere. And I was trying to figure out what was going on. And so I asked him, I was like, was there something that happened at school today? Because it was different than normal, because this was honestly last year. And so obviously he's a teenager now, he's grown, he can communicate more. And so he actually told me that in the classroom that he's in, a kid was crashing out all day. So in our house, crashing out means that like they're just kind of upset, they're angry, they might be yelling, might throw things, break things. Mine doesn't do that. He just kind of more shuts down, but gives attitude. And so he was saying that a kid was crashing out all day. And so basically, my kid kept it together all day at school while another kid was crashing out. And I'm sure that you can imagine if your child's ever done this, or you've been around kids who are doing this, where they're just like completely dysregulated, it can be really dysregulating to us. And so the fact that he actually kept it together all day and then honestly just came home with a smidge of an attitude versus he didn't crash out in our home, like I was actually super, super proud of him because of that. And it shows how much he's grown. Number 3 is to repair things when there's a rupture. So you're going to mess up, you're going to raise your voice. It doesn't disqualify you. In fact, repair is where connection is built. A simple, I got overwhelmed, I'm sorry, I love you, can change the tone of your entire relationship. So repair has been one of the biggest key factors to me rebuilding my relationship with my son and rebuilding trust with him. And yes, I said rebuilding trust because I had broken his trust. Even though he had broken our trust, I would say from an emotional standpoint, I had not always been what he needed me to be when he was younger. And I very much felt like the Lord said this was an area that I needed to work on rebuilding. And I think that it was important to acknowledge that to him, that like it wasn't just him that was working on this relationship, that it was me also. I found that pride has no place in our relationship. When I'm wrong or I think I've done something wrong, I tell him and I apologize. This has brought so much healing to our relationship, which has allowed him to feel safe enough to apologize to me when he's wronged me. And that was something that he's not done in the past, is he was not really an apologizer. He just would move on and act like nothing happened. And one day he came home after school and I had asked him to do some sort of chore, and I will totally admit I was struggling that day. And so I kind of was having I took offense to something that he said, kind of thing and he got mad and he like threw down the broom on the ground or something and then went to his room and slammed his door. And I'm sitting here thinking, fantastic. Like he's going to crash out. Like this is just going to ruin the whole evening. Like I was having all the thoughts about it. And then I think I was probably just sitting in a chair scrolling through my phone because, that's our favorite thing to do to buffer, right? Is like scroll. It just helps us to like not actually deal with our actual emotions. And he came out and I think he picked up the broom and then all of a sudden he just walked over to me. Now he is 6'3" and I am 5'3". So I was sitting in like a dining type chair and he came over and he kneeled down and he gave me a hug and he said, "I'm sorry." And the thing is that there were times when he used to say he was sorry because he was trying to make the situation go away. But I've seen this change in his heart in the last couple of years because of the connection that I have focused on building with him, that he now, and the modeling of apologizing and accepting responsibility when I'm wrong, he's now actually doing that. Now, every once in a while, he'll hang out and be like, yeah, I'm not apologizing for that thing, like the one thing kind of thing. But most of the time, he apologizes because he's seen me model that. He gets it. He sees that I did something wrong and I need to repair this because we've made it such a big part of our relationship. So 4, the last one, is to be calm in the chaos. Your child doesn't need you to match their meltdown. They need you to anchor them, to be steady, to be a steady presence for them when they've lost control. This doesn't mean stuffing your emotions. It means learning to stay grounded so that they can borrow your calm. When they are young, building that foundation of being the anchor in their storm is so important. Now, I will be the first to admit that I'm not perfect. There are days that my hormones and my attitudes get the best of me when I choose the offense over connection. But because I've chosen connection more times than I've chosen being right, he can now handle me having an attitude. It also doesn't hurt with him being a teenager that I can now throw a little attitude and wrap it in a joke. Like, I'm choosing violence today, so be prepared. It softens the blow. Most importantly, when we are the calm in their storm, it helps them to learn how to be the calm in their own storm. I've seen it come to be our reality. Building attachment with your child isn't about getting them to behave. It's about becoming the kind of parent that they can trust with their whole heart, even when they're a mess. It isn't easy. It's not instant, but it is holy work, and it is possible. And I am living proof of that. So, Mama, what I want you to take away from today is that in the middle of those hardest moments, when it looks like your child is being defiant, remember that connection is not the reward, it's the foundation. If you're looking for a little extra support between episodes, make sure to become an insider. It's my email list where I share encouragement, emotional regulation tips, and practical tools to help you parent with more peace and connection. You can join by clicking the link in the show notes. Hey, sweet mama. I hope you loved today's episode. Can you do me a favor? If this episode spoke to your heart, would you take 30 seconds and share it with a mama in your life that needs to know they aren't alone? Also, would you leave a quick review on Apple Podcasts for me? It blesses my heart to know this show is giving you hope in the hard moments. All right, I'm off to grab some protein because love and grace flows easier when you're not running on fumes and coffee. I'll meet you back here next week for another honest, hope-filled conversation. In the meantime, mama, stay rooted in faith and anchored in love.